2024 City Council meeting. Our invocation will be provided by Tim Allison, chaplain of the Visiting Nursing Association Hospice, the Visiting Nurse Association Hospice. Please stand for the invocation, and please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
In this season of Thanksgiving, we are thankful for the privilege and honor and blessing of leadership. Thank you that the people of this city have entrusted their leadership to these men and women gathered here tonight. I pray today that they would know that they can have a wisdom beyond their own wisdom and a compassion beyond their own compassion. Bless everything we do, and may it reflect the high calling that you have called these men and women to. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Fierce.
Here.
Councilmember Perkins.
Here.
Councilmember Stewart.
Here.
Councilmember McCandless.
Here.
Councilmember Wiley.
Here.
Councilmember Vaught.
Here.
Mayor Rowland.
Here. And that brings us to citizens' request. We only have one tonight, Robert Sorensen. Well, I need to ask the council first for a motion.
So moved.
We've got a motion to suspend the rules
Second.
to allow people outside the city the opportunity to speak. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the issue? I'll just take a voice vote of all those in favor. Say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And the motion carries. Mr. Sorensen, you have 5 minutes. The podium is yours.
This will only take a minute. My name is Bob Sorensen. I live at 800 Southwest Powell Drive, Oak Grove, Missouri. I'm on the executive board of the Loggers Retiree Group of Independence. I'm here speaking tonight in regards to the GEO bond that is to be voted on in 2025. I am not speaking in favor or against the passage of the GEO bond. I believe there are some very important issues needed to be addressed for my members and the citizens of Independence. Many of the retirees live in Independence, many of which have submitted the form to Jackson County to freeze their property taxes at the 2024 rate. They would like to know if the passing of the GEO bond in April would impact their property taxes. I have watched prior GEO bond committee meetings, council meetings, and study sessions where this issue has been brought up. I have yet to hear a definitive answer. I believe that you, the city, should know the answer to this question in order to proceed. I'm here to ask that question and for the council and the city to go on record with the answer. I would like to thank you for allowing me to speak on this issue tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sorensen. All right, we have a resolution for Gabe Glazier, planner for the Community Development Department. He is this month's iStar Award. Could I have a motion and a second to approve this resolution?
So moved.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Fierce.
Yes.
Councilmember Perkins.
Yes.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yes.
Councilmember McCandless.
Yes.
Councilmember Wiley.
Yes.
Councilmember Vaught.
Yes.
Mayor Rowland.
Yes. And here is the resolution. Whereas the Service Recognition Program recognizes outstanding performance and exemplary acts of service of employees of the City of Independence. And whereas an employee is selected by the iStar Committee, the Service and Teamwork Above Responsibilities Award recipient for exhibiting the qualities and ideals that best represent public service. And whereas the Service Recognition Committee has selected Gabe Glazier, planner in the Community Development Department, for the iStar recipient as of December 2024. Now therefore be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Independence as follows, that we now recognize Gabe as this month's iStar Award winner. And I just want to give you some examples of why Gabe was selected. Gabe was nominated by his supervisor, and they said, I nominated Gabe after observing the way he interacts with the public. He takes time to really listen to people. Part of his job is to talk to landlord-tenants, to take landlord-tenant complaints. He will sit down with tenants and give them a sense that someone has their back in a difficult situation. His supervisor said, I have seen people come in crying, and after they interact with Gabe, they seem to breathe easier. He tries to find a solution, and he goes above and beyond to help them out in their situation. Another specific example is, there's a frequent tenant that comes in several times a week in the past month. His patience with her and his willingness to answer her questions is above and beyond. One time, she came in 3 times in one day. One time, she was crying. He gave her the listening ear that she needed in that moment of feeling uncertain, unsure. He took the time to explain her options and advocate for her so that she truly felt like her answers or her questions would be answered. So for that, Gabe, we recognize you today for the iStar recognition. So please come forward. All right, this brings us to our consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Please proceed.
I move for the approval of the reports and recommendations of the city manager.
Thank you. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We've got a motion and a second for the approval of the consent agenda. Anyone want to pull something for separate consideration?
Mr. Mayor,
Please proceed.
please pull Resolution 24-795 and 24-797.
So resolution numbers are resolution number 1 and number 3, but 24-795 and 24-797. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And also number 24-796.
Okay. Any other items for separate consideration?
Mr. Mayor,
Please proceed.
item number 3,
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, we've got a motion and a second for the rest of the consent agenda, so we'll approve that now, and then we'll approve the separate items individually. If there's no further discussion, Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Fears?
Yes.
Councilmember Perkins?
Yes.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yes.
Councilmember McCandless?
yes.
Councilmember Wiley?
Yes.
Councilmember Vaught?
Yes.
Mayor Rowland?
Yes, and the consent agenda items are approved, 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Councilmember Stewart pulled 24-795. I'll have you do that one first, and we'll go to the second one. So Councilmember Stewart, please proceed.
Motion to approve Resolution 24-795.
Okay, we've got a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Councilmembers, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. City Manager, during the presentations on this, they were talking, they mentioned a couple of times, there's some parking lots down there that the city owns and the county owns, and they were talking about maybe even putting like apartment complexes there. So just a question about that. What does that do? We do Santa Calagon Days on the square every year. What would that do for that? Because that's where the carnival goes. Any idea at this point?
Yeah, that fair question, Councilmember.
Right now, maybe at a higher level, what I would say is adoption of this plan. Let me tell you what it will do, but what I don't think it will do. This will do is allow the master developer to now engage their network and their contacts to show the plan that's been developed, but also that the city council has lent their support to it. This allows them to show that there's political will and an interest and a desire to continue acting on these redevelopment goals for the historic square. What this does not do is necessarily lock us into a specific outcome at a specific site. So in your example, yes, right now that is shown as a multifamily apartment unit. However, obviously we would have to negotiate that with the county and their interest, and in being a good partner with the chamber, we would want to understand their future plans. What would that impact be to them? What are the needs so that we can be a good partner for the annual festival? So I would say that rather than anyone who reviews this plan locking into this is definitively where the apartments are going to be, and this is where the grocery store is going to be, and the Trails Museum, or any of those kind of projects, look at this more as concepts of the vision the city is trying to bring. More density, more vitality, more life, and as a result, more economic growth and sales tax revenue and property tax revenue and utility revenue to the city.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So just make sure we're clear on this. We're just approving a plan. We're not planning on throwing in any money at the development. I mean, this is all going to be private investment. Is that correct?
The only public investment that may be necessary in the future would be if we had to bring utilities to a site like we for a public building, like if the Trails Museum or a new community center, which has conceptually been discussed, things like that. At that time, at this time, that is the bulk of the expenditures that I would foresee. But the goal of this plan is really to attract private investment into Independence, new development through private means.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor.
Please proceed.
Mr. Walker, just to make sure I think I want to make sure the public is clear on what we are doing by approving this resolution is essentially that we are putting our general, agreement with the plan that was presented to us. But so I just want to get you to say, kind of exactly, you started down that road, but I thought you might go a little farther in terms of exactly what our approval of this item does for the plan.
It's very important in many instances, but specifically to this item tonight, for the development community to know that there is will and appetite for development in any community. Developers want to go where they know they're going to be welcomed and embraced. Projects are expensive, time is money. If they don't want to run into things like red tape and government regulations or, resistance from the community. So by adopting this plan, it sends a message that generally speaking, the council is open to redevelopment concepts that bring density and vibrancy to the square, 7 days a week, evenings, days, all of that. It does not lock you into specific outcomes. It does not mean that, at the block where they have represented a grocery store, that there's definitively going to be a grocery store there. Market will dictate that, interest will dictate and drive that. But this is more for the developer to be able to tell the community, not only do we have this plan, but the council has endorsed and adopted it. We are excited and open for business and Independence.
And when there are specifics that are, like for example, the overlay they discussed, that will come for us in a special resolution. Or
That would be
special
separate
ordinance.
action to help, continue to facilitate the development that we've spoken to.
Right. Good.
Okay, very good. Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor,
Please proceed.
just real quick. Thank you for all that conversation. This is definitely one of the next big steps that we're doing for our downtown. And just to read the first sentence on the Reshaping the Square Master Plan. The overall master plan is a long-range look into the possibilities of restoring the historical downtown of Independence to an active center of living and commerce. I think that kind of says it all on top of the other conversations. So thank you for this work.
Yes, sir.
Very good. Anyone else? Okay. Then with no other discussion, Madam City Clerk, please call the roll on 24-795.
Councilmember Fears.
Yes.
Councilmember Perkins.
Yes.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yes.
Councilmember McCandless.
Yes.
Councilmember Wiley.
Yes.
Councilmember Vought.
Yes.
Mayor Rowland.
Yes. And 24-795 passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. The next up is 24-797. Councilmember Stewart, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. City Manager, before I have some questions and then even an amendment to make as well. But before I do that, can you give us like a brief background of what the ARPA funding is?
Yeah, let me do that and be happy to do so. So, in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, federal government allocated funding to different jurisdictions, including the City of Independence, to help address and respond to. Guidelines were given about what eligible expenditures would be. And back in 2021, the City Council adopted a resolution that outlined how the city was going to spend its approximately $21.4 million that we received. The legislation from the federal government said that the funds have to be allocated by December 31st of 2024, so at the end of this month. Over the last several months, in anticipation of that deadline, my staff has gone through to look at those original allocations approved by the council to see where there were unspent funds. You know, anytime we bring you a budget, it's our best guess of what it's going to cost to support something. So there were areas where funds were had a small surplus because the projects came in under budget. There are other places, though, where our needs still extend beyond what was originally appropriated. So in an effort to ensure that the city does not forfeit the balance of its funds, of its unspent funds, we are asking the council to do essentially a balancing of the checkbook for the ARPA funds, reducing those projects which we no longer need dollars for because they've been fully spent, and allocating it to the projects where we do have charges or expenses that we can ensure these dollars are spent and the city doesn't forfeit those funds. So that's just a general overview of this program.
Thank you. That may have your response may have answered one of my questions, or actually the question that I had. In here, we reduced the amount of money spent for the detention unit cameras. Is that because, is there an explanation for that? Reason why
Yes,
not?
so any of the project budgets where you see reductions, those are examples of where we have funds already spent and or we know the amount left over. So for example, on the detention unit cameras, for those that aren't able to pull this up and watching the meeting, originally the council allocated about $196,000 for that. We are recommending a reduction of $103,000 from that amount to reflect the amount that was expended on that project, which is $92,000.
Okay, thank you. Okay, last thing, I am going to make a motion to amend this resolution. I want to remove the downtown master development. Right now, it would put it at $442,141.76. And to replace that, I want to add the Heidelberg Bridge for $380,000 and the Kentucky Bridge that runs over Mill Creek for $62,141.76.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second for the amendment. Any discussion to the amendment? Please proceed.
To inquire of the city manager.
Please proceed.
Mr. City Manager, are we able to allocate those dollars? Because I know ARPA has a lot of restrictions, both on what you can spend it and the time frame in which it has to be spent?
Yes, a great question, Councilmember McCandless. So our original resolution reflected what we thought was reality. On the Heidelberger Bridge, we were running into an issue of a property owner who did not want to grant the city an easement that was necessary to do the replacement of the bridge that's since been closed. We did not think that because of that we could confidently allocate and expend those funds in the timeline that we've got. Just today, our staff, our engineering staff, was able to determine, in speaking with contractors throughout the metropolitan area, that there is a solution that will not require us to work in an area that would necessitate gaining that easement. So we have a solution to replace that bridge, and actually slightly under the original cost of what we thought, which is reflective then of the $380,000 that we're requesting there. The amount of money for the Kentucky Avenue Bridge, I know we've spoke a lot about Kentucky Avenue bridges. This is actually a second Kentucky Avenue Bridge. If you'll recall, I've shown you a list before of 13 bridges and told you 4 were closed and the other 9 were in jeopardy of needing to be closed. Well, that happened this past week when the Kentucky Avenue Bridge near Dickinson Road had to be closed due to safety concerns. So the amount that's being requested this evening would fund the design cost for replacement of that bridge decking. We are confident we can get that money spent in time and in accordance with federal law. This was a project we were going to have to pull from some of our emergency repair funds, so this actually allows us to preserve those for potential other emergency issues that might arise this fiscal year, and allow these funds to be spent in a manner that's certainly benefiting a lot of people in that area that are suffering right now as a result of that closure.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Any further discussion? No further discussion on the amendment. Madam City Clerk, please call the roll on the amendment.
Councilmember Fears?
Yes.
Councilmember Perkins?
Yes.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yes.
Councilmember McCandless?
Yes.
Councilmember Wiley?
Yes.
Councilmember Vought?
Yes.
Mayor Rowland?
Yes, and the amendment passes 7-0. This brings us back to the main bill, 24-797. Councilmember Stewart, you have the floor. Any other discussion on the main bill, or do you want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve 24-797 as amended.
But we did the amendment for the,
We did.
I don't remember us doing the emotion on the main bill.
I did not.
Second to the
Okay.
motion on the main bill.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify,
I didn't because I had the amendment to do.
Right,
That's the reason.
because if I remember correctly, you did the amendment, but you didn't make a motion. We made the motion for the amendment, and
Yes.
we're going back to the main bill. Thank you. So we've got 24-797. He's made a motion, a second by Councilmember Perkins. Any further discussion on the main bill?
Mr. Mayor,
Please proceed.
thank you. Mr. City Manager, as we're doing the housekeeping on these last little bit of the ARPA funding, that your team is bringing these recommendations to the City Council after much consideration on where these funds can be at the most impact, correct?
Yes, sir. This is highest and best use, which was really the spirit and intent of these funds when they were originally allocated and approved by Congress. Again, some very specific guidelines around those, but intended to have some community-wide benefit associated with them, and certainly reopening these bridges and helping people access medical services, places of employment, schools. That's all in keeping with what was envisioned when this legislation was enacted.
Sure. So just a quick rundown of a couple of things that are not being fully funded. At least through this plan, they are being funded, just not through these funding mechanisms. One is the square streetscaping. That is not being funded. We are removing Chrysler Bridge. So I guess my quick question for you is, with this reduction, are we wrapping that project into the Truman Connected project as a total piece?
Right now, we continue to run into some challenges of getting contractors to bid on that project. If you'll recall, and I can't say definitively why, let me begin with that, but I have some ideas. And one of those is, if you'll recall the presentation last week around the general obligation bond, many times contractors like to bid on volume. It's expensive to mobilize equipment. It is expensive to mobilize employees. They like to go where there's large contracts. I don't want to say a small bridge project, but a smaller bridge project relative to what some other jurisdictions are currently bidding out right now, isn't necessarily worth it to them to mobilize equipment and manpower. We will continue to bid this project. It is, let me also say this, it is envisioned to potentially be funded as part of the general obligation bond issue. I know the Heidelberger Bridge is on that list. I know the Kentucky Avenue Bridge over Mill Creek is on that list. There are many, many more bridges than that were on that list. So these solutions tonight are allowing to get 2 of those bridges off of that list, but there are 2 more right behind it and many more in the queue also. So this does not lessen the need for bond funds to resolve our bridge issue. That was just within the amount that was being contemplated by council, the original priority bridges that were identified by staff. So long-winded answer to say yes, we will continue to look for vendors who are interested in supporting that project, as well as finding mechanisms to fund the replacement of that bridge.
That'll be exciting. Still pretty rough over there. Moving on to the Kentucky Ave and Courtney Atherton Road. This is for design purposes. We still have a full build-out. That will be some months down the road. Any potential timeframes on when that can possibly be?
Let me have Assistant City Manager and Director of Municipal Services, Lisa Reynolds, come forward to speak just a little more directly to that project.
And why she does, many of you, if not all of you, understand where this part of the road is, which is a east-west connection on the north side of 24 Highway for much of our city.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. To answer your question, it would be a few months for design. I would estimate 6 to 8 probably to get the contractor doing the design to finalize the scope, which they're working on now. And we should have by the end of the week the full design price tag and the scope, which will give us the schedule. But like I said, 6 to 8 months for design, and then we would bid for construction following that.
Okay. Well, we'll just bear down and do it then.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I
Anything else?
have, Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else? On 24-797. Seeing no other discussion, we've had a motion and a second, so Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Fears,
Yes.
Councilmember Perkins,
Yes.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
Councilmember McCandless,
Yes.
Councilmember Wiley,
Yes.
Councilmember Vought,
Yes.
Mayor Rowland.
Yes, 24-797 passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. That brings us to 24-796. Councilmember Fears, please proceed.
Mr. Mayor, make a motion to approve 24-796.
We've got a
Second.
motion and a second. Please proceed.
Mr. City Manager, you made a great presentation on this, but maybe not everybody watching tonight saw that presentation at study session. Just wanted to ask you to kind of give a summary of what we're going to be doing relative to Convention and Visitors Bureau and how that's going to work and some things of that nature.
Be happy to. So again, at a high level, we all know and appreciate the great history that our community has, as well as the assets that are a part of that history and that storytelling. What we as a city want to do better and improve upon is spread the word about these really cool stories and cool assets that tie into that story, so that people from outside of our community will want to come and visit Independence. Maybe they're not aware of all of the givings and opportunities that we have here. So to attract their attention, obviously we all know as consumers there's a lot of noise out there and competition for our time and our money. And we want to, be a louder voice and a star in that competition. So, looking at other models and best practices, we have recommended that a standalone Convention and Visitors Bureau is in the city's best interest to give it the most competitive advantage relative to the peer cities we compete against for that attention and those dollars. This would roughly split the current transient guest tax that the city collects in a 50-50 manner. 50% of those revenues would continue to be held here at the city and utilized for the maintenance and upkeep of our historic sites that the city owns and is responsible for providing care for. The other 50% would then be utilized by this new standalone Convention and Visitors Bureau. We would develop a contract for services between the city and that entity that spells out our expectations of the deliverables from that entity. That entity, in turn, would have to go through all of the processes for any new organization. They would have to file with the Missouri Secretary of State for nonprofit status. They would need to appoint, actually the council, pardon me, would need to appoint a board of directors. And then that board of directors would need to develop and adopt bylaws and then start to fill out the permanent day-to-day staff for that organization. So tonight, by authorizing this resolution, you'd be giving staff the direction to initiate that process, to start the filing with the Secretary of State's office, to start drafting bylaws, to start preparing a contract for services with the goal of having this entity functional with the start of the new fiscal year on July 1st of 2025.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Anyone else? Other further discussion? If I could, Mr. City Manager asked some questions. One of the things that I think we as a city need for transparency and accountability for our citizens is, matrix of success. And I would ask that we make sure that this board establishes those matrix of success so we can say these are our milestones for success in this project. I think that's really critically important. I know we've set the timeline to be July 1st because that's our new fiscal year. But with FIFA coming up and the importance of that, is there any way that we could have a discussion around moving that up so that we could have an executive director before that time? I recognize there's not a budget for that, but how could we work on that? How can we make that happen so that we could get that going ASAP? And then I know, Mr. Cover, you'll probably have to work on the bylaws. How long would that take, or is it pretty standard boilerplate kind of bylaws that you can produce for that?
Some of it will be standard language. Some of it will obviously be need to be tailored to the organization. There is going to be some waiting period once we get all the applications filed and all of that with both the state and IRS in terms of getting everything approved. So that's probably where our biggest weight is going to be, and unfortunately that's outside of our control.
Right.
So we're with this, we're ready to go and start the process and get it to us as fast as to the next stop as fast as we can. But there are certain pieces that we'll probably have a little bit of a wait on. So once we get to the next step, we can update you on what that looks like from a timeline standpoint as best we know. But from our end, the pieces we can do we can do those in a relatively short amount of time. But again, it's the other agencies that are involved in this process that could take longer.
Okay, thank you. And things outside our control we can't control, but I just think those are some important things to try to do this as quick as possible. And what are measures of success? Because something like this, when we give $1 million to an organization, how are they spending it? What's being used? What's the results of the money? Those kinds of things. So I think it's fair for taxpayers to have that expectation. So
yeah, as far as what city staff can do on our end, we'll move as expeditiously as possible.
But Mr. City Manager, we'll continue to have a discussion about how do we fill the board, what do we do, how do we get that process, because the resolution just talks about that, but it doesn't talk about the process of filling those positions.
Correct. We, I want to say obviously, we believe that needs to occur by the council to continue to provide the oversight that was intended with the approval of the transient guest tax. But we will continue to add meat to those bones and define that process to empower the council to make those appointments.
Okay, perfect. But I think this is a great opportunity for us to get the FIFA process rolling. So very good. Thank you very much. Anyone else other discussion? Okay, this was 24-796. If there's no further discussion, Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Fierce?
Yes.
Councilmember Perkins?
Yes.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yes.
Councilmember McCandless?
Yes.
Councilmember Wiley?
Yes.
Councilmember Vaught?
Yes.
Mayor Rowland?
Yes. And 24-796 passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. That brings us to item number 3. Councilmember McCandless, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, I begin with making a motion for approval of item number 3.
Thank you very much. There's a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We've got a motion and a second to approve item number 3. Please proceed.
Thank you.
Mr. City Manager, can you explain what this is? I think this is one of those things that I want to be sure that the general public understands the why this is necessary, how it's going to be funded, and what you anticipate the different phases will do. There have been questions around some of our demolitions in the past, and I want to be sure that we have a good discussion about that.
I would like, Mayor, with your indulgence, to ask our Director of Independence Power and Light to come forward. As he's doing so, one thing I do, I think I'm maybe better positioned to speak to this than our Director. This is a project that the city's management analyst, the independent management analyst that reports directly to the council, was involved with in reviewing how these selections occurred and the appropriateness thereof. So just to ensure fairness, appropriateness, all of those important caveats with a project of this magnitude, that has occurred on this and is coming to you in that fashion and through that lens. To the specifics of the project, I'll defer to Mr. Hagendeffer to speak to that.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Joe Hagendeffer, Director of Independence Power and Light. So appreciate the opportunity to provide some clarity around this project. So this project specifically is to take down the large Unit 3 stack at Blue Valley Power Plant. As you guys know, that power plant has been decommissioned and shut down for quite some time now, and that stack was built back in 1965 and stands there with a lot of concrete and brick, and as it sits there, it's going to slowly decompose over time. We do safety evaluations on it yearly, so I don't want anybody to fear that it's just going to fall down tomorrow. But as we look at that project, we know that it needs to come down at a certain time, and the sooner we do it, the cheaper we do it. Just like every other project, the longer we wait, it's going to cost more money. So when you ask questions around the phasing of this project, right, so this specific request is for an EPC, which is engineer, procure, and contract out. So we're asking an engineering firm, Burns & McDonnell, who has taken down over 70 stacks throughout the country. So they're very professional, they're local to us, and they know this process. This stack is also kind of in a sensitive area. You can't just, like a stack that would be in a power plant that's totally shut down and there's nothing around it and you see the big explosion that come down. This would have to come down in a controlled fashion, right? So we still have the service center out there, we still have employees working out there. So the phases of this would be, number one, for Burns & Mac to do a complete evaluation of that stack to look at anything that it's connected to that may have to come down as well. So it's connected to still old parts of the plant, the ducting and stuff like that, to see if that's safe to stay up or does that need to come down as well when the stack comes down. Also to evaluate materials. Is there asbestos? Is there any other hazardous items that are going to need extra care and consideration when doing this project? Then they will go out to bid to hire an actual contracting firm, and then they will provide the project management throughout this project as well. So that's what this contract is not for. I'll be clear, it's not for the contractor to take it down, but this is for the engineering and the project management of the demolition of this stack.
So let me just make sure this has gone through our regular bid process. We followed all the rules for how we would bid this, just like any other project.
So this one, we asked several engineering firms around the country who did this, and we did end up sole sourcing this to Burns & Mac due to the fact that they have the expertise in-house, and we could not find that in any other engineering firm that had all that. I think as our city manager pointed out, we did consult with the management analyst of our city and discuss this, and we did follow the proper procurement policies in order to accommodate this.
So I understand this is just the study phase. This isn't the knocking down phase.
That is
but
correct.
Just for the community, they will get noticed before it happens so they understand what road closures would look like and environmental risk and noise risk and all the other pieces that would come along with this.
Absolutely. And just so we can be clear on timing, I don't see actual deconstruction happening or demolition occurring till probably late next year of 2025. It's going to take a while to do. The engineering phase will take probably 4 to 5 months, and then there'll be several months of going out to bid to find a contractor who specializes in this as well. So,
And then
it
that
could be
would
quite
come
a
back
while.
to the council for approval for that next phase
For
as
that
well.
phase, yes.
Perfect.
And this is included in our capital project, so when you ask where the money's going to come from, this is part of our budgeted capital projects. This is a project that's been on the books for several years that we have pushed and pushed because of the evaluations we've done each year have shown that it wasn't absolutely necessary right now, and with our budgets and watching our spending over the past several years for IPL, we have kind of pushed this down the road, but my staff and I feel that now is the time to start moving forward with some of these projects and carrying these on.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. Anyone else? Other discussion on item number 3? Seeing no further discussion, there has been a motion and a second, so Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Fears?
Yes.
Councilmember Perkins?
Yes.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yes.
Councilmember McCandless?
Yes.
Councilmember Wiley?
Yes.
Councilmember Vought?
Yes.
Mayor Rowland?
Yes. And item number 3 passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. This brings us down to the regular agenda. Our first ordinance is 24-107 for a second reading. Madam City Clerk, please proceed.
24-107, second reading. An ordinance amending ordinance number 19544 by updating certain legal descriptions where design changes became necessary and finding, determining, and declaring the necessity of acquiring construction easement for the Leslie to Crane at Hereford project, project number 132201, authorizing the negotiation and eminent domain proceedings if necessary, approving the plans and specifications for the project, authorizing the use of experts as needed, authorizing and directing the execution of documents and the payments of funds to property owners holding property rights in conjunction with the project. Second reading.
Thank you. Any discussion on 24-107? Seeing none, Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Fears?
Yes.
Councilmember Perkins?
Yes.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yes.
Councilmember McCandless?
Yes.
Councilmember Wiley?
Yes.
Councilmember Vought?
Yes.
Mayor Rowland?
Yes, 24-107 passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. It brings us to 24-108. Madam City Clerk, please proceed.
24-108, second reading, an ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute a certain grant agreement with the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission for the 23rd Street Sidewalk Phase 2 project, project number 112111-2/federal project number TAP-3379-445, second reading.
Thank you. Any discussion on 24-108? Seeing none, Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Fears?
Yes.
Councilmember Perkins?
Yes.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yes.
Councilmember McCandless?
Yes.
Councilmember Wiley?
Yes.
Councilmember Vought?
Yes.
Mayor Rowland?
Yes, 24-108 passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Brings us to 24-109. Madam City Clerk, please proceed.
24-109, second reading, an ordinance approving a final plat for Jackson Drive Industrial Park in Independence, Jackson County, Missouri, second reading.
Thank you. Any discussion on 24-109? Please proceed.
Just for clarification, this is in the area where the North Point projects are already underway?
Tangentially to
Okay.
this,
It's
but
a-
this
it's
is
across, yeah.
on the other side, I would say, of the old Independence Airport, but still in that same area. Now, these are what I would call lower impact buildings than what you see with those North Point buildings, just due to the size of the land we're talking about, but certainly in that same area and in keeping with the development we're starting to see there.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Fears?
Yes.
Councilmember Perkins?
Yes.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yes.
Councilmember McCandless?
Yes.
Councilmember Wiley?
Yes.
Councilmember Vought?
Yes.
Mayor Rowland?
Yes, 24-109 passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. It brings us to 24-110. Madam City Clerk, please proceed.
24-110, second reading, an ordinance amending Independence City Code Section 5.01.023, license denial, suspension, or revocation, second reading.
Thank you. Any discussion on 24110? Well, Mr. City Manager, if I may, I know we had a lot of discussion on this morning.
Yes,
if you
sir.
can bring us up to why is this important? What do we need to do with it? And why is it being brought to the council?
Would be glad to, Mayor.
Thank you.
Obviously, the council knows that Independence welcomes and desires new business to come to the city, and then businesses to continue to operate and expand in our city. To ensure that those businesses operate in a way that is safe and healthy, both to their patrons as well as the community at large, there are certain regulations in city code that ensure those outcomes are met. From time to time, we do encounter a business who has run aground of some of those regulations, and it is the city's preference to work with those businesses to remediate those concerns and ensure that they're able to continue operating, both for their own livelihood as well as for the economic benefit of the city, but to do so, again, in a way that's in keeping with the city's regulations. I would say, and I did not pull statistics for this, but I would say on average, less than once a year, the city does run into a situation where there is a business that has either so egregiously violated our city codes or has proven themselves to be a habitual offender of the city codes, that the city believes it's in the best interest of the community's health and safety and welfare to revoke that business license and have that particular owner cease operations of that business. From time to time, when that occurs, what we have experienced at the city is that a relative, an immediate family member, a known associate of the previous holder of the business license makes an application to have the exact same kind of business use operate where the city has just revoked that. And we quickly end up in the same place we already were because, that ownership group has not changed hands, and their philosophical approach and behavior that the city was trying to remediate, it just comes right back into operation. So passage of this ordinance would state that if you have your business license revoked and somebody wants to come in and apply for a new business license at that site, but to have the same use that was already at that site, then that is going to require a special use permit, which means it has to come to the city council for your consideration. That would allow us as city staff to investigate that a little more thoroughly, have some mechanisms in place to determine their familiarity and or relationship with the previous license holder, so we can determine if we believe this is going to be somebody who's going to abide by and operate to our standards and in keeping with their peer businesses in the city. It's certainly not our desire to prohibit people from operating, to prevent that transfer of intergenerational wealth in a family, but it is our desire to protect the health and safety and welfare of our residents, the people that patronize these businesses, the employees that work in these businesses, and ensure that they operate in a manner that's becoming of our standards here in the city. So this just provides us with a level of scrutiny that we currently don't have in that rare circumstance when we believe it's most advantageous to revoke that license because of past behavior.
Very good. Thank you very much. Anyone else have further? Please proceed.
Thank you for asking that first question. I have one follow-on. I understand this is something that does not happen very often. It is a business that is in violation of the standards of the city, and that they would have gone through all of the steps necessary to reach this final conclusion that we have pulled their license. Just want to be sure this does not change any of their ability to make appeals or to use any of the processes that the city has. This is really kind of the terminal step.
Yes, this would be after somebody has exhausted all of those appeal processes and then maybe was hoping to utilize somebody familiar or related to them to help reacquire and reestablish that business. So this would not prohibit them from exhausting their right to due process.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else have further discussion? Seeing none, Madam City Clerk, please call the roll on 24110.
Councilmember Fears.
Yes.
Councilmember Perkins.
Yes.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yes.
Councilmember McCandless.
Yes.
Councilmember Wiley.
Yes.
Councilmember Vought.
Yes.
Mayor Rowland.
Yes. 24-110 passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. This brings us to first readings. I know there are many, so Madam City Clerk, please proceed.
24-111, first reading. An ordinance amending Article 1, Property Maintenance Code of Chapter 4 of the Independent City Code and adopting the 2024 edition of the International Property Maintenance Code and making other necessary revisions, first reading. 24-112, first reading. An ordinance amending the Article 4 Plumbing Code of Chapter 4 of the Independent City Code and adopting the 2024 edition of the International Plumbing Code and making other necessary revisions, first reading. 24-113, first reading. An ordinance amending Article 5 Building Code of Chapter 4 of the Independent City Code and adopting the 2024 edition of the International Building Code and making other necessary revisions, first reading. 24-114, first reading. An ordinance amending Article 6 Mechanical Code of Chapter 4 of the Independent City Code and adopting the 2024 edition of the International Mechanical Code and making other necessary revisions, first reading. 24-115, first reading. An ordinance amending Article 7 Electrical Code of Chapter 4 of the Independent City Code and adopting the 2023 edition of the National Electric Code and making other necessary revisions, first reading. 24-116, first reading. An ordinance amending Article 12 Existing Building Code of Chapter 4 of the Independent City Code and adopting the 2024 edition of the International Existing Building Code and making other necessary revisions, first reading. 24-117, first reading. An ordinance amending Article 13 Residential Code of Chapter 4 of the Independent City Code and adopting the 2024 edition of the International Residential Code with 2024 Energy Code amendments and making other necessary revisions, first reading. 24-118, first reading. An ordinance amending Article 14 Fuel Gas Code of Chapter 4 of the Independent City Code and adopting the 2024 edition of the International Fuel Gas Code and making other necessary revisions, first reading. 24-119, first reading. An ordinance adding Article 17 Energy Conservation Code Commercial Provisions of Chapter 4 of the Independent City Code and adopting the 2024 edition of the International Energy Conservation Code and making other necessary revisions, first reading. 24-120, first reading. An ordinance amending Chapter 9 Fire Code of the Independent City Code and adopting the 2024 edition of the International Fire Code and making other necessary revisions, first reading. 24-121, first reading. An ordinance approving a rezoning from District C2 General Commercial and District R12 Two-Family Residential to District R6 Single-Family Residential and R12 Two-Family Residential for the properties along 18th Street and Ash Avenue in Independence, Missouri, first reading. 24-122, first reading. An ordinance approving a rezoning from District I1 Industrial and District R6 Single Family Residential to District R6 Single Family Residential for the properties at 2301 South Chrysler Avenue, first reading. 24-123, first reading. An ordinance amending the Unified Development Ordinance Chapter 14 of the Independent City Code pertaining to trash haulers, first reading. 24-124, first reading. An ordinance calling for an election to authorize the issuance of general obligation bonds for the City of Independence, Missouri, first reading.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk. And this brings us to councilmember comments. Councilmember Stewart, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Earlier this evening, there was a public speaker that brought up the general obligation bond and whether or not 65-plus individuals that applied for a tax freeze if their property taxes would be increased if the GL bond passes. Mr. City Manager, do we have a definitive answer on that?
Yes, and the answer is no.
Okay.
Anybody that files for that and is approved, though your market value can certainly change on your home, a property tax freeze means a freeze. So our impact of our new levy pursuant to the approval of general obligation bond, any of the three questions or all three would not impact those individuals.
Okay, thank you. And that's because the general obligations bond going is part of the levy? Is that
Correct.
correct? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I had reached out to somebody with the county as well, and that's pretty much the way they explained it to me, just somebody that I knew. So in addition to that, I know you're coming up with some numbers that I don't know if they've been released yet, but I know you're trying to come up with some numbers that we have an idea of what each individual resident would be paying. Is that going to be, and it's going to be, I know it's going to be very hard to find out how many people have applied for the tax freeze and have been granted it, because quite frankly, I know this because I work for the county, people are still applying every single day. They're receiving emails every day about people applying. So is some kind of consideration going to be taken on the people that have applied and been granted, so the ones that don't get the tax freeze have an idea of how much their property taxes will increase? If that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And, again, the approval of the bond would not, the opportunity to approve that would not occur until April of 2025. So then, obviously, that impact would come with the bills that would come out in calendar year 2025. But also recall important caveat and factor. The levy will only change commensurate to the amount of debt that is issued by the city. And with the approval in 2025, I would say it's probably going to be a nominal amount, and we're working right now to quantify sort of a debt schedule for the council, as you mentioned, Councilmember Stewart. But it takes certainly time to design these projects and get them completed. So the amount that would be borrowed in 25 will probably be nominal at best, which would then give time for those applications to be processed as well. But at the end of the day, I will say this too: the city has that obligation to ensure that we're honoring and following state statute, and we're going to work very diligently with our partners at the county to ensure our taxpayers are being assessed their appropriate rate.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember Stewart. Councilmember Fears?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few things that seemed to all center around the square happened to be this time. First of all, was able to attend the square lighting. Several of us were there. That was a really, as always, a good event, but it was really well attended this year, and was really excited to see so many people out. Wasn't frigid cold, and so that was nice. And also connected to the square, I hope that our citizens were able to take advantage of the opportunity to see the Hallmark movie Holiday Touchdown. What a real tribute to our city, and a tribute to the folks on the square that put that together. Helped do a lot of work to put that together. So that was really well done. I was really excited to see that, and it's definitely worth seeing that movie. So hope to encourage people to do that. And lastly, this Friday is the Living Windows up on the square. My grandson's personal favorite. And they look forward to that every year, and so we'll be up there on Friday night and look forward to hopefully seeing a lot of other folks there as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Vaught?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was exciting to get to be a part of the Independence Square lighting ceremony this year. What a great tradition that brings our community together to kickstart the holiday. Weather was great, and I want to thank everyone that helped make that event possible. Also, I just wanted to say thank you to the crews who worked to clear our roads during our recent 3 to 4 inch dusting of snow. I know that a lot of people were not happy that they weren't out sooner, but I think the storm took most of us by surprise. I heard trucks out past dark, so I just want to thank them for their service to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Wiley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about our animal shelter. This is the time of year when people start considering buying a dog for Christmas. So I'm just putting a plug in there for adopting and not buying. The shelters are at critical capacity right now. I think we've talked about that before, all the shelters. And we have puppies and we have purebreds. Sunday I walked a doodle. So if you can just start at shelters before you reach out to breeders, it would really help us out. And if you insist on a purebred, there are local rescues. There's rescues for all purebred breeds. So again, you can always adopt if you need to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember McCandless.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of things. First, I hope you get a chance to go to the Vail Mansion. It is decorated for Christmas. It is beautiful. They outdo themselves, I think, every year. It's well worth seeing a little bit of the decorated history of Independence. Secondly, we were lucky to be able to welcome former Governor Jay Nixon to the Truman Library for the Truman Public Service Award. And the best part was there were Republicans and Democrats in the room, and he spoke to common sense, to honesty, to fiscal stability, and about the need to work across the aisle for solutions that work for everybody. So it was a joy to get to welcome him. I want to say that I appreciate the police department releasing video of the event that happened at the local apartment complex. I know it is hard to balance information for the public, privacy for the family, and the process that you need to acknowledge for a good investigation. But I do think that that was an important step for community building and making sure that people had at least beginnings of answers. So thank you for that. I know that was not an easy decision to make. And my final thing is just to acknowledge a story of community sharing and grace that happened when we did a house blessing at a Habitat home. The gentleman who received the home talked about being in a rough spot. His name was Quincy, and he had a son who was in high school who was really struggling, and the family was struggling both with finances and family stability. The school liaison referred them to Community Services League. He got involved with Independence Together and began to get back into the work system, saved enough money to satisfy his old debts, got referred to Habitat for Humanity and did their housing program to learn how to be a homeowner and to get his credit taken care of. Holy Rosary Credit Union stepped up to provide a loan. Local contractors came together to provide materials and labor. Volunteers came together to put that house together. And the lady who had lived there and raised her kids, Mrs. Rust, who was a very tiny woman, stood with her gigantic sons, and everyone was in tears as she handed over the keys to this new family. And it was a beautiful example of the collaborative and good work that happens in this community all the time. So I just have so many good things to say about these organizations who work together. They also worked with the city to make this happen, and it just is an example of what we can do together. So there's your Thanksgiving miracle right there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Perkins.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, to continue on with the good organizations that do work in our community, the Community Service League on Thanksgiving opened up their doors and served food, had a good time there. I did not participate, but the heartfelt warmth and thanks were much appreciated. The Hallmark movie, what a great presentation for Independence. Had some nice local shots there, some of our eateries and watering holes, so that was kind of fun to see. And gosh, it was a good excuse to actually get me to sit down and watch one fully and completely. So that was accomplished. Also, Bingham Wagner Estates, they were on Fox 4 this weekend. Christmas just looks beautiful. Our square looks beautiful. Inglewood looks beautiful. It's just a fun time, and that heavy light dusting we had kind of made it look pretty cool for a moment. So, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Source, I know you spoke this evening, and you had called me last Friday and said, hey, what's the answer? And you're absolutely correct. I didn't at the time have a definitive answer. I know I talked to you at the council meeting just for a tad this evening, but we will give you a definitive answer. And what I mean by that is we'll get you with a memo from the bond council to put it in writing that this is in fact definitive to cover that, because that is a great question. It's a great question for all of us. It's a question I've had. I know Councilmember Stewart and all of the council members here have had that question. So we'll be happy to work with you, and I appreciate you calling, and I appreciate you reaching out. So thank you for doing that. Love the Hallmark movie, just did a great job. I love the fact that Clintons continue to keep their name on the building, so I thought that was cool. And my granddaughter was very, very excited to see me stay awake through the entire movie. Councilmember, it was truly an honor to give Jay Nixon the Harry S. Truman Public Service Award from the City of Independence. It's truly remarkable. The City of Independence gives that award out, and some incredible people have earned that award over the extent of the time that it's been given out, and it's just a great, great event. Tomorrow is the Mayor's Prayer Breakfast. It starts, the doors open, I think, at 6:30, but we don't start the actual event until the doors open at 7. I've been corrected on that. Thank you. The doors open at 7, but we will start the program at 8 o'clock and end promptly prior to 9 o'clock. So I promise you on that. So with that being said, Mr. City Manager, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do a lot here at the city to try to improve quality of life and certainly do our part to help better the economic development conditions that matter to companies and businesses that are looking to come to or expand in Independence. There are certain other factors, though, that remain outside of our control, and that's why I was very pleased to see and wanted to thank and publicly acknowledge the Independence School District, who recently, like many of our school districts, received their annual progress scores for 2023. This year, Independence was one of only 2 school districts across the entire Kansas City metro that has now recognized gains in their test scores for 3 consecutive years. So we are in rare but extremely good company, and certainly blessed to be serviced by 4 high caliber districts here in our community, but wanted to thank and give shout outs to the school district, Independence School District, for their work to help our efforts as a community as well.
Very well said. Anything else, Mr. City Manager?
Nothing else this evening. Thank you.
And you're absolutely right. When people buy a home, they do not buy a house, they buy a school district on many occasions. And we're lucky to have a school district that performs to the level that they have. Very, very good. If there's nothing else on the agenda, the meeting will be called adjourned. Thank you very much.